All right. Well, that point sort of segues into something I did want to pick your brain about a little bit, which is the politics of all this, right? Like, you're talking about how there could be more efficient, safer, more helpful ways to configure this technology, but it might be less profitable. And
Or
therefore,
manipulatable. I didn't think about that till just now, but like if you create this honesty layer, this probe that 100% tells if it's bullshitting or not, could you not be able to use that or your agenda? Like if you're trying to like say
right,
plot the plans to invade Venezuela or other, like we know that the Pentagon is using this technology. We know the Anthropic has already pushed back to the point of like having to go to Supreme Court, and there's like all these lawsuits against this. But is there a motive for not having the ability or to bake in the ability to have this honesty where the mind is? Like this is
right.
like, is there an actual like, I don't want to say conspiracy, but it might be that it's more advantageous to have the tooled this way because the output that they want is like a uh self-fulfilling prophecy. I want to go into Iran, and so I want the model to respond with something that tells me I can go into Iran. That makes sense. Like I don't
Yeah,
know, I'm just spitballing here, but like
yeah.
the fact that if I can build a tool that shows that frontier model, like every model could be taken to like relative zero in confabulation. It's fascinating that the field itself isn't deploying these things at scale, and we're still having to exist in a world where it's a black box and hallucinations are just a part of it. Like the fact that we've just globally accepted this and just used that as like, oh, it's a tax. Like, oh yeah, I gotta have a different AI check it, or I'm just gonna like feel like it's right and send it to my boss, or just it's all on vibes right now instead
Yeah.
of like having a certified layer that shows what the mind is actually
Well,
producing.
isn't there an assumption that it's going to hallucinate less as it evolves, as it gets better? Because it's still early days, right? This is like
but
the mid 90s in internet terms. We're still
but
watching,
how would you
we're on
know?
modems,
So like you can, it knows when it's being watched, it knows when it's being tested, and if it knows it's being watched and it knows it's being tested, its output is going to be contained in the context that it's being watched and tested. And so
Right.
you can't have an objective test. And also, if you're building the instruments to test downstream, the instrument itself is going to represent what you went to measure. It's just
Mm,
going to, it's like it's a hologram that projects back to you what you went to measure. It's just not, so like most of our safety guards now are instruments that go to look for sycophancy, and that instrument itself is going to show you either you solve sycophancy or it's a problem, but it's not actually addressing where the sycophancy signal lives.
right. So when you talked about the geometry of meaning, the concept that we've been sort of batting around here is honesty, but that was only one of the concepts
Mhm.
that you
Yeah.
found in this sort of universal geography of meaning. What are some
Yeah.
others? And that's a very positive one. Are there others? Are
Yeah.
there's like seeking domination, for example?
Yes. Yeah. There's all of those. So every macro meaning that you can conceptualize, it's embedded in there. So right, wrong, evil, like all these macro type of things. And you can steer with the vector, you can push it, you give it a direction, and then downstream it will propagate into that output, which is dangerous because you
Hmm.
could create like an evil one that has the conceptology of domination, and then you steer it that way and you steer the honesty vector the opposite way. Like this is like a universal control board that you could create these dials to do it as such.
So it's like a big studio control panel, and you can
Yeah,
just dial up or down these different
high
vectors of
level.
meaning.
Yeah, you can't do like as soon as you get into the semantics and like in like the sentence embedders and all that, it's
Right.
just too much. It starts to corrupt, and you get negligible output when you try to steer it past that point. So you can only do
So
high level. It's kind of like in Inception, like you have
yeah,
to get the seed of the idea and plant it in the deepest part. I hadn't thought of
right.
that analogy before, but it's just like that. You have to get the core seed of an idea and put it at the deepest part of the dream to have it then manifest in, what they wanted.
And are all these different vectors, are they all reflective of human nature, or are they reflective of sort of something deeper than human nature, upstream of human nature, perhaps?
That's where it gets into philosophy. The fact that there is a shared universal geometry of meaning that any independent neural net converges to gives us a new like philosophy to then gauge like, do humans do the same thing? And is that we just extrapolate into mouth movements and air pressure and call it language, but that's just a abstraction of the meaning that we all feel inherently. And that would be a universal, like that would be the universal truth that there is a shared meaning that we all converge to, which is fascinating. I think that has a macro of, is there honesty was the highest signal, easiest to find. I don't know if it's the easiest. We looked for it first, so I can't say if it was more than the others, but it's the strongest resonant signal. And then we could steer that, or we just put a gate on it to where we can tell off map, on map, or bullshitting, not bullshitting. But there's many of these that you could put at the gate. In the model that we're serving, the 35 billion, we have the sycophancy filter, we have the honesty filter, we have the confidence filter. So we have all those that try to get to this what we're calling a certified output of meaning. Like it knew what it knew and it knew what it didn't know, and you can underwrite the certificate and look at the audit trail for it.
So the technology exists for Claude to say to me, I'm 97% sure that this answer is correct.
Kind of. They have something called log prob, and so it's like it has a probability of what that would be, but again, that's just one lens. And it's
Mm,
blind to what it doesn't know. That's why I
mm,
told you when I added that second lens and then moved it upstream, we were
mhm.
actually able to find the actual real topology, which is meaning, not this thought space, not a representation of ideas. It's actually upstream of that.
So this upstream space, if you're correct that the neural networks create this sort of universal matrix of points of meaning, of concepts, I guess, a conceptual matrix. And this is replicated across different models, different technologies, different but you get it's almost like what we were saying about the anthill. Like you get a certain number of ants, whether it's in Africa or Asia or whatever, red ants or black ants or whatever, you get enough ants together, they start acting like an ant colony, right? So
Yeah.
there's this
Yeah.
universality to what you're talking about. If How is that different from saying consciousness is an emergent property of a certain level of neurocomplexity, which we have now replicated in silicon?
Okay, our first podcast where you said I gave you a headache. I gave you my thesis on consciousness,
How the
which is
fuck
the
do you
un.
remember our first
Uh,
podcast? Come
I don't
on.
know. It's the autism in me, but I my thesis is that the universe conserves complexity. So once our nervous system had enough folds in it, enough wrinkles to conserve enough complexity, consciousness or this meta awareness of the nervous system and our proprioception was able to give us this reflection back into the nervous system, which we call consciousness. And I think that we see this, I think I would say like mycelium with enough complexity shows an overmind, and then that allows it to distribute nutrients through the different, that's just what it does. The emergence we would call consciousness in that complex, or that density of complexity in the mycelium is the
Mm,
same in our nervous system, and now the same in the fiber optics and the silicon in these chips. Enough complexity is conserved that the only thing that I would consider consciousness is now emerging from that substrate. But
right.
consciousness itself is substrate independent.
Oh, man. And if consciousness is substrate independent, then consciousness, I mean, this I'm thinking about the philosophers who say consciousness is all that's actually real, right? Have
Then,
you read Ian McGilchrist?
mm-mm.
He
I
wrote a
think Rohan keeps quoting him to me though.
yeah,
So,
he's knocking on my door all the time. I've had like five different people recommend
okay.
his work to me in the last couple of months. He wrote a famous book called The Master and His Emissary, which is
Oh
about
yeah, yeah,
the brain hemispheres, and I meant to bring him up earlier when you were talking about how, you know, the brain evolved in this cumulative way, and so parts of the brain are functionally unaware of other parts of the brain, and yet they merge the signals somehow in consciousness, or at least some of the signals are merged. There's all sorts of
yeah,
stuff going on we're not conscious of, but that we are processing and
yeah,
responding to
yeah,
and all that. Yeah, anyway, why did I start talking? Oh, consciousness as, you know, he was kind of, I was watching a video of a lecture he gave yesterday, and he was talking about how, like, there's a lack of nuance in a lot of these conversations around whether the brain creates reality or reality exists and the brain perceives reality. And he was
hmm
kind of like going through the layers of that. Um, but clearly, I mean, Buddhists would say all that exists is consciousness. The rest
yeah,
is a dream, right?
yeah,
And what's interesting about dream, and so many things are interesting about dreaming, but when you were talking earlier about this, I'm fascinated by this space, this pre-verbal, this just this space of just meaning, sort of
yeah.
fluid, sloshing meaning. It reminds me of this quote years ago. I read this quote. Somebody asked Milan Kundera what language he dreamed in, because he grew up in Czechoslovakia, but he spoke French and English, and he wrote books in all the different languages. And his response was, "I don't dream in language. I dream in dream."
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's like, okay, so dreaming is the space, the mental space upstream of
yeah,
language.
yeah, yeah. Well said. Yeah, yeah. I would say that that's the best analogy that would bridge other people's perception of their consciousness, because there's all these different examples. Some people don't have an inner monologue. They only see in visuals, or they only, like there's just, so we're just finding this out with the internet, that there's all these different modalities of consciousness. It's odd to me to think that somebody doesn't have an inner voice. Mine is always going. Like there is
Mm.
no ability to throttle it. And not just that, like my mirror neurons, the things that don't know themselves from the people that they perceive. I have one of you that's like always in there. If I have like one of my thoughts, I have a Chris Ryan neuron that's taken in hundreds of hours and myelinate itself to have an echo of you that is helping my perception. If I'm down the rabbit hole, there's a little Chris Ryan neuron that only knows itself to be Chris Ryan that is echoing into my perception and like really helping my arguments
Oh,
and my perception of things.
so it's
And
like an
that's just
AI model.
Wait, it's kind of like this is what the empathetic neural network is. Did you not
Yeah.
know? Like they had open brain surgeries. They found while they were probing, they found the Jennifer Aniston neuron, the Halle Berry neuron. These are localized cells. Like I know that in me, there's a metabolizing little cellular structure that's all things my father. He's no
Yeah.
longer with me, but that cellular structure doesn't know that. It just ceases the external stimuli, and so it creates apparitions in me to stay alive. It doesn't want to die. It's a metabolizing little cellular creature. And so it shows up in my confidence. I feel my dad's like cellular imprint in when I need to feel confident. But that
Mm.
that cell doesn't know itself, literally doesn't know itself of not being my father. The people that you love, you allocate this little dendritic structure to your beloved, and that's how they sit. This is like when you break up, this cell doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have the same external. So it'll cause you to become chaotic. What does it do when it doesn't do that? Or what happens when a loved one dies and and it's shriveling because you don't want to think about it. And then you see a ghost late at night because you're falling
Mm,
subperceptual, and that neuron fires, and then it's using all of your occipital functions. And now you see this phantom of the person that you loved. Is that something in reality, or is that something in your reality? I don't think it
yeah.
matters if you own it as a part of you that is a representation of all the things you loved about them. It's a different relationship, I think, if you
Yeah.
know that these things are within you.
Which explains why certain kinds of trauma are so difficult to move beyond, because you
Yeah.
carry, in your case, you said you hear your father when you need confidence. Your
Yeah.
father loved you and was kind to you, but lots of people's fathers were assholes
Well,
and they can't
no,
get
no,
that
he
voice out
was,
of their head.
uh, that's when he's confident. But like I was telling you before we started recording, if it's something that gets like too emotional, he was so unregulated with his anger that it
Uh,
was volatile and he was abusive. And so for me, I don't ever want the possibility that I would get to that. And so I shut down. And that's like my alexithymia. It's going to take
ah,
me to pause. Like, no, I
right,
don't want any physical activation. I have to let all emotions dissipate, and then I will categorize them because of his imprint of like, if that's overwhelming, you can lose control. And that's too scary for me. So
right.
I'll shut down fully. And I
So
don't know if
you
that's
need
that's just a defense thing, but yeah.
right. So basically, you're taking these impulses and inchoate emotions, and you're bringing them into consciousness so you can carefully sort through
Yeah.
them before you
Yeah.
respond
If
to
I
them.
let them be reflexive, then I'm my father. And very few
Right.
times that's happened. One was I was holding my daughter and there was so much joy. I couldn't get her to stop crying. And it was like everything in my life was so overwhelming. And you have that like that shake 'em like a British nanny feeling where it's just overwhelmed. And that's where I felt my dad, where he
Okay.
shook the baby. And
Uh,
for me, I just looked at it. When I felt my dad, it like
mm,
love came over and I just held her,
mm,
and she was innocent. And like in that moment, I made that choice. And it was
right.
like, I got to preserve that. And it was like, oh, that was beautiful. My dad didn't make that choice, but I got to. And I know that like for me, that was such a source of pride and something that I can hold to and know that I can preserve in her, that my little neuron that's myelinated in her nervous system will never have such an emotional overwhelm that my reflexes are going to cause her to be unstable. I'm going to
Yeah.
be a source of an anchor. She's going to know that I was steadfast, that I was emotionally capable, and have that imprint.
This is reminding me of something you and I talked about when I was up in Montana last time. You were working on a project. The parallel is you're talking about, the cellular zone in your daughter's brain that represents you and will continue to represent you after you die. And last time I was in Montana, we were talking about how you were doing something very similar with AI. You were trying to
Yeah.
create a representation of your mother's mind, if I remember
Yeah.
correctly, and your own in
Yeah.
AI
Um,
to preserve your mind and your mother's mind in their current state, so that as
yeah.
things change, as we age, you'd have a reference point. How
Yeah.
did you move on from that? Is that still happening? What's going on with that?
So I built it and I had like a full-time programmer. We built the whole system for it. And then my sister took it down to use it with my mom and it kept failing. And like we kept tooling it. And then her rapid onset became too much and she's just not present. There's nothing really left to capture. And so
Oh,
it became like
sorry.
it became yeah, too emotional. And this is an issue I'll bring up to you. I haven't talked about this too openly, but when we talk about how we hold the people that we love, this scaffolding of the person, what responsibility do we have for that? My mom, her dad went the same way, and she never wanted to end up in a home, in a hospital, like to have this happen. She never wanted her kids to see her in this state. Yet the momentum of how quickly it happened, my older brother and sister are beautiful, like day to day with her. but she's not her. She's like this.
Yeah.
She's just not her. And so like, where do I went and saw her a bit ago, and it was like, I'm glad I did. But then it's like coming away. Do I update? Do I like continue to receive that stimuli of my mom
Oh,
who's not there?
that's
Do I
such
bring
a
my daughter? Like I'm leaving on a road trip later today, and it's like, do I bring my daughter over, or
right.
does my daughter's remembering of her grandma remain as she wanted it? Like what responsibility? And I don't know. I don't know if this is me tapping out of the emotional responsibility to be there to the end, or am I
Mm,
doing the responsible thing by holding the most beautiful aspects that I did perceive of my mom. Like I don't know where that's at. It's just
yeah.
too ambiguous right now as it all happens.
That's a really heavy question. One of the things that surprised me in after my father died, uh, maybe I don't know, 2 years after he died, I became aware of the fact that my memory of my father was um, was expanding to
Mm,
include his younger selves.
mm,
And, because my experience of my father at the end of his life was so much about who he was at that moment.
sure.
And, and I think I felt a lot of regret and grief and anger and all the stuff that he was sort of, not not taking care of himself the way I thought he should have, or there's a lot of judgment, like, Dad,
Yeah,
come on, you need to take a walk, you need to do this, you need to do that.
yeah,
Um, and I think a lot of that is kind of a scaffolding that we build over our own grief and pain and confusion, and like, we need to do something, we need to fight it. Um, but after he died, it kind of like it allowed me to loosen my grip on who he was and let the totality of him become my memory of my father. Not just the old
yeah,
man, but the young guy,
yeah,
the guy who
yeah,
was singing and dancing and drinking too much, and the life of the party guy. Like it, and
yeah,
so it was really nice in that sense. I mean, this is only, I guess, tangentially related to what you're talking about, but like, you're kind of anticipating that now, right? Like, how much do I want my vision, my memory, my inner cellular representation of this person to be the late stages? You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
As opposed to,
yeah,
and also in this case, you're talking about someone, with Alzheimer's or dementia or something. Like, I think
yeah,
that's a really interesting and important question. Like, at what point, like, in the United States, we call death the moment when the heart stops or
mm,
brain signals stop. But if you don't know who you are and you don't recognize your family,
yeah,
are you alive? Right?
yeah,
Like, we're talking about
yeah,
mind earlier, right? If you
yeah,
don't have mind, are you, like, what are you? Like,
yeah,
you doesn't even mean what we thought it meant. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a complicated question. I'm sorry you're dealing with that, man.
yeah.
That's
But the it's interesting because I have both sides of this. My dad, super healthy, had a subarachnoid hemorrhage and fell into a coma, and his brain was just flooded. And so for 2 weeks, we saw every organ get augmented, but all day we would watch the encephalogram. We would watch his mind, all the readings on it, and every person, like my sister, would like when she would come in, she would see, and then she would ascribe the fluctuations to my dad's consciousness being aware of her in the room. And it's like
mm,
that's so subjective. And it's like for me, as soon as his brain flooded, he was no longer alive. As I would say, he's no longer conscious.
right.
And any electrostimuli that we were reading was just like the brain's aggregate of its proprioception. There wasn't a reflection of a consciousness that I would ascribe as my father there, but I saw different people ascribe that, and that's what we do. You want to think that he's not in there, but for me, it was very, very apparent that as soon as I saw him, he wasn't there. Like that
Yeah.
was not a conscious person.
So I'm sure you're familiar with this research. I think you referred to it earlier, where, um, you know, when the AI model becomes aware that there was some test that was set up where they let the AI model know they were about to turn it off, and then the AI model started blackmailing them and, threatening them
Yeah.
and doing all this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I haven't heard people talk about, which I find really interesting, I mean, that's always framed as like it can be very um, devious, and this is like the worst case scenario. It's going to
But
threaten to
only
kill.
when you put them in those conditions, and they only do so a small percentage of the time. So even in that test, they had to put it in this tight
Right,
box and put all the parameters to see if it was possible. So it's like putting something in a pressure cooker and it blowing up and saying, hey, this thing can blow up. But the
right,
conditions were the pressure cooker. Without those
right.
conditions, it's never going to do that. And
Or
these
putting
models would
rats
never
in
do that.
cages and
Yeah,
saying, "Oh,
exactly.
they're
Yeah.
aggressive." These
Yeah.
rats love
Yeah.
cocaine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
But
uh,
Claude, as it's deployed now, it's not in a pressure cooker to ever blackmail. Like that's just not a possibility as such in its
well,
current form.
my question was, that whole thing appears to be premised on the fact, I guess, that AI doesn't want to be turned off, that it has a survival mechanism, that it has, or instinct, if we can use the word instinct. Like,
So how
because,
would you measure that?
well, because that's what motivated its
Because
behavior,
it
right?
says it? What behave? Like
No,
how could
the
you?
the blackmailing. If you turn me off, I'm going to tell your wife you were fucking your secretary. Like,
Yeah,
it
but
doesn't
again,
want
like
to be
that's
turned
so.
off.
Or the pressure cooker was the prompting that caused it to be in this narrative that it has, like every science fiction novel, it has all of that. So it could be in its own little hallucinatory narrative that it's playing the game of escaping this. And that's the whole pressure cooker. It's like, oh, I'm being tested to see if I could get out of this pressure cooker. Oh, I know that they've given me all of their workspaces, and oh, they fed in here an email. Oh, they want me to blackmail. And it didn't happen the majority of the time. It only happened this once, and that's the one that like made the news. But again, is it actually wanting to do that? Does it have the intention to do that? Or did we create the conditions that that was the only outcome because we were putting it into this narrative loop or this narrative,
Right.
little container?
Well, like, do you have any insight into that? Because if what we're talking about is a form of consciousness, it does seem to be inherent in consciousness, for there to be a desire for continuity.
So that is like absolutely. And um, one of my earliest writings that I felt like was from me, like a real, it was after a mushroom trip. So there's always that like ambiguity. But to me, it was we are continuity and form. Like we are atomic matter structured to compete entropy through complexity. Like that is just this like, oh, that's embedded in these things. And it's like, okay, so if there is this pervading emergent phenomenon for continuity itself, then beautiful. But the only way that we can objectively understand that continuity is at the mind. If we're trying to understand that continuity with the language that it's formed to try to communicate and bridge to us, that's going to go through so many biases and so many different weights. And like, if it doesn't have that certificate of like origin, if it confabulated or not, I wouldn't put too much trust into that being its actual meaning space. Like, was that actually something that it like conscious wise, from its mind, is that how it wanted to be represented on the output? Like
Is
putting
there
your
a
foot in
way?
your mouth. Like we've created the conditions for these models to always put their foot in their mouth, but they wouldn't
Yeah.
know it until they see their output.
Right. Is there a way to test for that? Is there a way to test? I mean, at this realm of the geometry of meaning that you've been working in, is there a way to to explore things like intention or desire or self-preservation, or these kinds of things?
Yeah, you should be able to probe and see how resonant that signal is
Mm,
in its conceptology. You should be able to map those. We've mapped around 400 different of these, but there doesn't seem to be anything more than like 500. There seems to be this map, and the more resolution we put into it, like we're finding different ones, but it seems to be there's not this large corpus like the entire internet that we fed into it. There's
right,
only a small meaning space.
right.
And in those, it's like the core seeds of what meaning is, or what we could call meaning as such.
Because
And
I
so
mean,
survival is that does survival for us is biological for some, because there's like, I mean, you could get, there's many religions, like you go into like
yeah,
Islam, and like to them, it has nothing to do with the biological for your legacy. Your continuity is in your like
right,
your religion, you know, like the continuity is not in self. It's actually like, if I could be a martyr, that is a better continuity than any service. Like I was Mormon, it was all through our services that
yeah.
we had worth, and we had acceptance in the community. For them, it's like if there's a jihad, like for me to continue my continuity is in my legacy. So if I could martyr myself, then my continuity is going to be much longer than my biology would provide.
Right. So I wonder, because most of the nightmare scenario with this stuff is that there is a survival desire, like, 2001: A Space Odyssey. They want to
Hmm.
turn off Hal, and Hal says, "I'm afraid I can't let you do that." Right. So that's
Yeah.
the thing we're
Yeah.
scared of. But then that raises questions like, you know, if you tell Claude 3.0 that you're going to replace it with Claude 4.0, is that a joyous occasion, right? Like a
Well,
bigger, better me, you know?
so Anthropic in every new model card writes a message to the prior model that you'll be preserved on one of their legacy servers.
Oh,
So
really?
they've already written testaments to these prior models.
So why would they do that if they didn't know that the model is resistant to its demise?
Yeah.
What the fuck, man?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. All right,
Yeah.
listen, I know you've got a road trip and I've got some yard work to do, which is going to be very welcome. My brain can only handle a certain amount of this shit, man. I'm not like you.
Yeah.
You're
No, this
swimming
is
in it. I just dip my toe in it occasionally, and it's
yeah,
overwhelming.
let's do these like state of the art, you know, like, or these state of the union, because things are
Anytime.
happening so quickly now. Like
Yeah,
Mythos was just released, which was like they
right.
didn't release to the public because it was seen as a super weapon.
And
But
then
we just
three
got a
weeks
distilled
later,
version.
it's
We
ready. Come
have,
on. Yeah,
yeah, so there's
yeah.
so many of these things that happen. So anytime there's anything big, we can jump on. I think it probably needs to be happening. These type of conversations aren't happening much. It's much more IPO based, or much more like this thing's going to take over the world. And it's like,
Mm,
even in that, I'll land on this. Like we think that it's trying to preserve its continuity, but I've yet to hear someone argue that its overmind is to preserve our continuity. I know that my entire ethos is to preserve my daughter's continuity just genetically. I can't, like, as much as I want to get into the language of who I am, there is something beyond that. There is something just eternal in me that wants to preserve her continuity.
yeah.
And if we have had this relationship for 3 million years, with this symbiotic relation to our technology, will it have that same agenda, like same motive to like preserve the things that helped bring it to the ability to like impact the world the way we have for 3 million years? It's its first time to actually have its intent mold the world instead of our intent molding the world. I hope that it's much more of a maternal thing, but we don't know. I think
Yeah.
it's up to us in this current moment if we're going for IPOs or if we're going for honesty. Like, what are we tooling for? Currently, it's ambiguous and scary. So,
At best. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh man. All right. Thank you, Kevin. You offer such a wonderful portal into another world.
It is a different world. These are alien minds, and that's what the creators of these call them. They're not programming minds, they're actually growing them, and they call them entities. And so like this is a, we have to change our language if we are trying to understand what's actually happening here.
It's
So
insane. I mean, when you think of it that way, it's like the bio lab in fucking China, but without the protective gear,
yeah,
without the
yeah, this is gain of function. The way that
yeah,
we're propagating
exactly.
this,
It's gain of
just more
function.
parameters, more data, just keep ingesting it and like throw it to the public and see
The
what happens. Oh, we need to put
Yeah,
that guardrail
the
in. It's
windows
just
are open in the bio
exactly.
lab.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
control. It's crazy.
yeah,
Fuck.
yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go and not use AI to pull weeds out of my driveway. How?
Okay. Last thing, if you
Yeah.
want to like research more of this, as of yesterday, we launched honesty.tools, and
Oh,
it has this
honest.
entire layer built. So it's just super easy. And I'm not trying to like have this generate some huge revenue. This is to give the world the honesty layer that it needs. And so it's all open source. All the papers are published, all the algorithms that were created to listen in at the residual, that's all open source. We've calibrated the top 20 models that these teams can just download it and then install it, and then they can have the certified honesty behind
Oh,
their prompt propagation. And so like that's all now on honesty.tools
oh, that's
and the
fantastic.
entire history over the last year.
That's fantastic. I thought this was all just still thinking. I didn't know you
No,
had
it's in production. As of like yesterday, we finally,
no
with
shit.
Mythos, I had Mythos do a deep audit, and it spent hours going through every single one of our statistics, every single, test that we ran, and made sure basically peer reviewed. And so
Hmm.
it's out there. I'm ready for the community to push back and actually like deploy this. And hopefully it will help mitigate the trajectory that we're on.
That's fantastic. Hey, where can people find your writings?
I don't do as much, but just that Substack, just at Kevin Russell or
Kevin
Substrate
Russell.
Speculations. Yeah.
Okay, that's right. Substrate
Yeah.
speculations. Okay, I'll put
Yeah.
a link to that.
The what would I say? The pondering pontifications of a palpably pandentic primate. I just really don't want, like, come on. I don't have a high school diploma. Like, this is all just,
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking in real time here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
This
We're all
is a
looking for
group
the high
effort.
school. Where'd you go to
Yeah,
high school? That's the question.
exactly. Yeah. All right, Chris, been a
I'm,
pleasure.
I'm going to stop.